Jānis, and now stage is yours. What is the life cycle of the board games? You will tell us.
I guess we'll find out. Yeah. Good morning. My name is Jānis. Let me just get to the slide where... So basically what I'll be talking about is what happens to a board game from its inception to its end, one way or the other. So my name is Janis Grunte. I am a game developer and author, and I work at Brain Games. And you can actually see two of my games that I have worked on here in the exhibition hall. That's a little bit of shameless promotion here. Anyway, moving on. So what makes or what pushes people to create board games, right? In my case, it's my boss. He tells me, you need to create a board game, so that's what I do. But a lot of people just come up with ideas, for example, like Dan, on their free time, maybe. You know, you're not a full-time. You are a full-time. Okay, you're a bad example. Somebody else, please. So there are people who just will sit down and look at something like, you know, it would be good if there would be a board game about, you know, fairs or festivals or anything. And then they'll try to come up with a prototype and everything what follows that. But obviously for some people it's a job. Like for me, I either develop or design board games as a living. But yeah, and sometimes it's more fun, sometimes it's less fun, depending on the game and other things. Yeah, so now, what is the process? So you have the idea for the game. It always starts with the idea, and in my example, people who create board games, or maybe games in general, have been doing that for all their lives. So when you were a kid, you probably thought, hey, it'd be cool if if we'd played football differently, or if we'd play basketball differently, or something else. You'd use these cards for that, or this. So, yeah, so those people usually never stop thinking about games. I mean, I think every person who has ever designed a game has like non-stop process of like, if I could use this for a game, or if that for a game, and so on and so forth. So those are the people who will eventually, hopefully, come up with the game. But, oh, it doesn't fit in there, but it's an idea at the beginning. So what is the whole process of getting your game probably published? Not necessarily, but probably. So first thing you need is an idea. Either it's a mechanism, either it's a theme, or either it's something requested for you to do. Then you create a prototype. You create a prototype, then you test it, then you improve it, and then you maybe get it published. So, and that playtest and improve process can go on forever. That's one thing where you have to call it. Well, if you work for somebody and create games, they'll tell you that, okay, we run out of money, we have to publish this at this point. But if you're doing it for yourself, at some point, because you can do it, I mean, forever. You just can, oh, maybe I'll change this, maybe I'll change this, maybe I'll change this. And at some point you have to call it. You have to say, it's done. It's done, I'm done improving, it's as good as it gets. And here I'm gonna quote a famous board game author, Rainer Knizia, who said, the game is ready when there's nothing else you can take away from it. Just, you know, you've taken everything away, made it as simple as possible, and then it's done. So at that point, you're probably going to try to get your game published. You should have done your presentation now, because that's your part where you're coming. But yeah, so there are many ways to try to publish your game. I think, well, at least pre-COVID, the easiest was to go to fairs and pitch it to publishers, because somebody will see you. Maybe not the big guys, and I don't know how your experience is then with that, but it's probably harder to get in with like Asmodee booths and pitch your games there than it is with smaller publishers like Brain Games, for example. We'll see everybody, so you're welcome. So yeah, but there's another quote I read sometime by one of the. This is related to book publishing, but I think it relates to board games as well. Sometimes a lot of factors that you are not responsible for come into play. For example, somebody's looking for a specific game, and you have this specific game, and they don't really care if it's good or bad, but they were just like, we should have a game about chickens. And they're like, I have this game about chickens, great, we'll take it, because they thought we should have it. So you got lucky, right? So not necessarily always your game, depending on how good or bad it is going to be enough. It depends on the situation in the world, depends who you're pitching to. You might be pitching to me, and maybe I hate like games about crocodiles, and I'll try to say, no, it's just crocodiles, come on. And that's it. Nothing you can do about it. Just try with somebody else. But let's say you got your game published, right? You went through that birth process, and now the game is here. It's in the world. People can get it. They can play it. They can buy it. What happens now? Are you done? Is it over? You're happy? Well, I hope your game is going to be evergreen. What means evergreen is that, let's say, it gets really popular at first, and then you just, receive your royalty checks or just, enjoy, and it just, obviously the the amount is gonna go down over time, but it still gets republished, it gets bought out constantly, so, that's what they call evergreen, and I wish for everybody to have such a game. Obviously, maybe one game, depending on what that game is. Maybe if it's Catan, it's enough, you don't need any other games, and you can just live off that, but smaller titles might not be enough. For example, full-time designers that design games, they usually design 20, 30 games published, 20, 30 games per year. But there are not a lot of people who can manage that, just, keep pumping out those games and ideas and actually get them published. I think ideas is easier. But most of the time, well, this will happen. Your game will get published. It will get a 1 or 2 print runs, and then it will just stop. Either the publisher will say, it's not selling too well for us, it's not doing well, maybe the publisher messed up, maybe the market wasn't correct. We don't know, but that happens a lot of times. Not a lot of games are evergreen. But that not necessarily is the end for your game, because especially in board games, and I think they were doing that even before video games started doing that, they do second editions, they do rethemings, they do expansions, but usually expansions are only going to happen for games that do well. So let's say you published a game, it didn't do well, and the publisher said, we're not doing it, and gave you your rights back. It's not over. You don't have to throw it out. You can just, shop around. You can change something, you can retheme it, and you can try another publisher, right? Or if you really believe in the game, you can try to self-publish, which seems is more and more likely in these COVID times. So for example, Kickstarter or crowdfunding platforms is a way to go, because traditional distribution is pretty tough right now, strained because of the costs and everything. So maybe even going in first, you can try to explore self-publishing, which obviously is much, much harder than just giving your rights to the company and just forgetting about it, just emailing them, where's my royalty check? So that's the way how usually games, the road ends for the board games. Well, that was really quick. But yeah, so what I would like to, who's here from the board game industry? Can you raise your hands? Wow, why was I telling you guys this? You could have skipped this.
You was telling it for those who are remotely connected.
Oh,
there are a lot of, around 50 connections.
Oh, cool, yeah. So the best thing, this is just my experience, and I work for a relatively small publisher. Egils might not agree maybe, but so we haven't published many games, right? Let's say around 20 over these years, yeah? Let's say around 20. And so there's, our experience has been different. We had some games that are done, and then we have some games that are kind of evergreen. So, but what I'd like to hear is from you guys, questions and maybe comments on what is your experience with this. For example, yeah, just go ahead.
Yes, just go ahead, as he said. The first question.
Thank you, Dan.
Hi, Jānis. So my first question is, I think you already mentioned a little bit. So do you think iSchool is an evergreen?
Yeah, I think that's our evergreen, right, Egils? I have to look at my boss, and then if he slowly nods, I go, yeah, that's an evergreen.
And the second question is, which part of the process do you, as a person, focus on most?
As a person, when I'm as a designer, a developer, designer.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, usually for me, when I come up with an idea for a game, is the theme for me personally. That's why, for example, one of the games that is there that you can look at is a historically themed game about the War of Latvian independence. So I'd like to read about things, and then I'm like, this could be a cool topic for a game. And then I think how to put anything like mechanisms below that theme, so to make a game. That's what I would do. But in, for example, case of high school, that happened the other way around. We were just playing with different pieces, and then we thought, it'd be cool if there would be a game around this piece. So in a way, that was like a lucky accident, maybe. But yeah, for me personally, I'd like to find a theme and then put a game underneath that theme. Hopefully, the mechanisms fit the theme. Yeah.
I have one more question. So, talking about mechanisms, what, in your perception, is the biggest trend of the last couple of years in terms of a new mechanism that we didn't see before?
Wow, there's not a lot of things that come in. Well, I'm going to stretch those couple of years even longer. I'd say the legacy games is a huge thing, but it's been out for like at least 5 years, I think. Maybe somebody knows when Pandemic Legacy, or Risk Legacy actually is the first legacy game I think that came out. But yeah, definitely these games that change over time. Obviously, there are two types of legacy games now. Ones that you put stickers on and they're done. Oh, that's actually one thing I should have mentioned, how they end. Some games that are legacy games, when you play, you put stickers, you write, you rip up cards, and once you're done, that game pretty much so is over. In most cases, you can't replay it. It's done. But there are some legacy games that try to let you reset the game now. Either it's new stickers, new board, or whatever. You just can, try to do that again. So I'd say legacy is one of the biggest splashes that has happened recently. Also, another thing, more and more hybrid games are coming into the market, where you use an app to do something. For example, from the latest releases, it's from Fantasy Flight Games. There's this huge game called Descent, Legends of the Dark. And what it does, it has a companion app that just stores all the info, what items you have, what's your experience, how far you have come. So basically, almost like a video game, but not really. It just kind of stores your info and just calculates the damage and everything, but you do have the board and you move pieces physically around the board with different set of rules. So yeah, hybrid games are also another big thing that are more and more coming into board games.
Yes.
People who don't know me can also ask questions, not only people who know me.
Yeah, thank you, but my question will be a bit, it will be a harder one. Like, okay. Looking at the process that you mentioned before, it for sure takes some time. You also mentioned that you can polish an idea just forever and ever.
Yeah.
But then the publishing part also takes time, judging from the later presentation, starting from, well, searching for a publisher and then getting it published. But how would you look at the process of not creating a new idea coming from a outside source of board games, but inspiring from existing board games? So let's say if we take the same legacy genre of board games. So there are a lot of them, they're popular, why not create a legacy board game? But then how much time it would take, and let's say, how would you approach the process of creating a game inspired by already existing other titles with hopes of it being still fresh after many years until it might get published?
Mm-hmm. It's a very good question. So I'm going to look at this from two sides. First, I'm going to answer the easiest part, which is how do I look at games that use something that's already been done before. And I think it's totally fine, especially if you mention them as an inspiration. I mean, you can't, nobody can't stop you from creating a directly exact game that somebody has. It's just going to be frowned upon, and you shouldn't do it. But if you put your own twist on it, I think that's okay. There's a lot of examples of that, especially in the worker placement. I'm not going to get into the mechanisms too much, but there are games that, like, you play it and you're like, it's exactly like that, but it's simpler, for example. So what they did, their twist on that was they took an existing game and they just removed some things from it to make it more accessible and simpler. In a way, it's exactly like that game. Or sometimes maybe somebody will take two existing formats. Another big thing that has happened in the last 10 years in the board games is deck building games. And then what recently happened, people took deck building, which is usually just a card game, and added a board to it. So basically, just combine two things. They combine the board and combine cards together, and then a new game comes up. So I think it's perfectly fine using things as inspiration, and especially mentioning them, that this is my inspiration, and just putting your own unique twist on it. And now comes the hardest part of your question is designing a legacy game. I think it takes a lot of work. I wouldn't know even where to start. I think playtesting, I don't know this is just speculation. I think playtesting is a nightmare for that, because if people already know what's coming or they have tried these things, I don't think they can, be surprised again, right? They've already been surprised, so they used up, you have to find another playtester for that. And especially depending on the game, there's a lot of content that goes in a chain. So let's say if the fifth link doesn't work anymore, does it mean you have to change the first four? So I wouldn't know. I'm just speculating here. Maybe somebody has designed legacy games here and can comment on that. But I think designing legacy games, and that's another reason why there aren't that many of them, even though it seems like they are, is because creating them takes a lot of effort and time.
Okay, some more questions?
Let's continue on the same topic. So about the ideas. Now, for example, I see a lot of games about Tetris spaces, like Isle of Cats, Parks, and so on.
Yeah.
So on. When Dan said that games come to life like in 2 years' time, so what's your take on how did they happen on the same time? So where is the seed of it? Because, well, there was probably one first game, and then like a lot of them, like Parks, not Parks, but the...
Barren Park, yeah.
Yeah, Barren Park, the zoo thingy, the New
Yeah.
York Zoo, and so on, so on. And they must be, the beginning of them must have happened, well, at some time all together, without each of them knowing and been developed in parallel. How did that happen? Do you have any idea?
I think it's a lucky accident, but to be honest, it's similar like how the phone was invented. Two people invented it at the same time. Just one was quicker in getting it, getting a patent for it. Just universe aligns in weird. But sometimes I think there was a first game. Usually there, like what Arthur's asked. Yes, I planted Arthur's in the audience to ask me questions. What Arthur's asked is it okay to use something that already exists? And I think for example, I think the biggest splash was like Patchwork at the beginning. One of the first games that like just created this. There were games before that, but Patchwork just created this big, huge splash of these Palomino games. And then I think a lot of people thought, hey, yeah, that's a good basis to create their game on. And I think a lot of people at that time decided that it's a good thing to try on. And that's why so many games came out. Another example is, that was the lucky accident part, is the Dominion game that I mentioned, Deck Builder. Right? Soon after, another game by Mike Elliott came out called Thunderstone, which also used the same exact mechanism, and they came up with the idea at the same time. So weird, right? Maybe they're both Americans, so maybe they went to like some kind of workshop or master class, and we're having a master class actually here at 2, where we're going to create games. So probably we'll create something unique, and in 2 years there's going to be 10 similar games like that, very popular and evergreen. So sometimes I think there's maybe subconscious inspiration from something, and sometimes it's just weirdly what happens, yeah.
Any more questions? Don't be shy.
Oh, hi, Jānis. I would like to make an analogy. Like when you're growing your child, you do not care about like the imperfections of the child, right? You just love it.
Yeah.
And in some sense, the games are like, like your own babies. You're kind of growing them for like 9 months and even more, as you said, 2 years. So how do you feel about the imperfections of of your babies, of your own board games? Or maybe they are perfect, I don't know. But how does in general, maybe they should like be improved in some sense after the game is released. And how do you feel about that particular thing?
This is a good question. We recently talked with some of my friends that board games will always be behind. In this way, behind video games, you can't just easily patch them, right? A video game comes out, you can just put out a patch, everyone's patched, everything's okay. You put out a board game, you're like, oh man, that scenario is messed up. You can't patch it. That's it. I don't know what you do. You just put an errata online or something, so it's very tough. I don't think any board game is perfect. Neither are kids. So just like my kids, I have more than one kid. I have more than one board game. Hopefully one is better than the other. One of those hopefully will succeed in life. I'm talking about the board games, not the kids. So not all of them are perfect, but I hope they do one thing good, and then I'm happy that they do this one thing good. And in case of my children, I hope they're happy also. Yeah, hope that answers. Yeah, but no, I don't think any of my board games, and generally there are board games that are perfect. It's just what you're looking for in the board game. Yeah.
So I both have a comment on that. The biggest answer I had and have been taught teaching people is kill your darlings. It doesn't matter how cool they are, just kill them and go on. And the second one, the actual question I have for you is, what was the longest iterative cycle you've had at Brain Games? Like how, from idea to finish, what was the longest project you've ever had?
Well, should I name all 10? Or I'll just start with one. One of those you can actually see in the exhibition hall is called Iron Forest, which is a spiritual sequel to Ice Cool. When Ice Cool came out, we thought, okay, first of all, we thought it's a family game, but it got all these children's awards, so what do we know? So we thought we need to create a game that uses the same basic mechanisms, just is more for families or grown-ups. And so that was like so many years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, pretty much so right after High School came out, which was in 2017, right? Or end of 16, yeah. 16. And so right after that, we started working on that. And I think the one version you can see there is 3rd or 4th iteration of that game. And what makes it even sadder is, well, maybe not for you, but for me, it's such a simple game. I mean, there's not a lot of, well, there is a lot of depth to it because it's 2 stories high, so yeah, never mind. And we thought that the game was good, then we gave it to people, and they didn't think so. And then we're like, oh, okay. So we threw that out. Then we created a game. I thought, oh, this is simple. We can play it in 20, 30 minutes in our inside playtests, in-house playtests. And then we gave it to people, and they played it for 90 minutes. And we're like, what is going on? Why is it taking so long again? We threw that out. And so we got to this iteration that we liked and people on the outside liked, and it doesn't take 90 minutes to play. And obviously, some things can still be improved, but we just had to call it that, like I mentioned before, because especially if you're designing for a company, sadly, companies don't have unlimited resources to let you just develop this forever and ever and ever. Yeah. You have to, at some point, just publish it. Sometimes it will be a good decision, sometimes not. If any of you play video games, you probably know the story about Cyberpunk. So sometimes maybe a year or 2 would have been a better choice too. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Okay.
So 5 years, to put it in numbers, 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much. We have to move for the next speaker. Jānis, thank you very much for your presentation. And I will not repeat. You are Latvian, you know what is inside. Thank you very much.